Hey everybody, this is Ted Winn, and we are excited about this episode of Perspective. I have on my friend who is a CNN analyst and an author and an educator, Mr. Keith Boykin. He has a new book out entitled The Politics of a Darkening America, Race Against Time. It's a book you want to get. Stay tuned for this episode. Peace. So hey everybody, this is Ted Winn, and I am delighted to have my guest today, author, analyst, educator, activist, Mr. Keith Boykin, who is also, as I said, author of this incredible book, The Politics of a Darkening America, Race Against Time, which we'll discuss today along with a few other things. So Keith, how are you? How have you been?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Caught me a mid-bite. You did that on purpose.
Of course I did.
I didn't have a long something to say before this. All is good. I'm in Los Angeles. No complaints.
Nice. Well, I wanted to have you on and have this conversation just about the climate of what's happening. Here we are at the in Black History Month, and there's so much happening in the country as it relates to the legislation that's being fought against that would help to make voting rights fair. And this voting fair, this is what's really interesting to me about it, is that voting is supposed to be a right of every U.S. citizen, not a privilege, not a benefit. Like, it is a right that we have as citizens in this country. We know that Black folks have always had to fight for that right. Civil rights movements, we go back to the 50s and 60s, and you had all this push for voting rights legislation and the Voting Rights Act, et cetera. Here we are in 2022, still having conversations around voting rights. Mm-hmm. Last month, we honored the life legacy of Dr. King, and I was talking to some people around that time and asking, how do you think King would feel knowing that here we are 2022, basically like 60 years later, still having this same conversation? We can't know, but do you think King would be surprised?
I think Dr. King would be surprised?
Yes.
Oh, not at all. I mean, if you look back at his own rhetoric, he talked about the same issues we have today. He talked about the filibuster, complained about how the filibuster was being used to prevent voting rights, not only in the Senate, but for the majority of the American people. He argued back in the 1960s that we have a group of misguided senators who they don't even want their own body to vote in the Democratic majority elections. So they certainly don't want the majority of the American people to vote because they don't represent the interests of the American people. We have the same issue today, but this is the way our system was designed. And that's important to note, because a lot of times I'll make a comment about the fact that we have a dysfunctional democracy, or we don't have a democracy in this country. We have an oligarchy or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I'll get these comments from these people on Twitter who will say things like, "This is not a democracy; it's a republic." Oh my God! They're educating me on something I don't know. Like, I didn't go to Harvard Law School and teach political science and teach. Come on. Like, of course I know what kind of government we have, but democracy is a larger term that is used to encompass a republic. A republic is a form of democracy. But the republic that we have is still a democracy, and it's still dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. And it was created to be somewhat dysfunctional, but it was created essentially to perpetuate the interests of white supremacy. And it has done so quite well. It's manipulated and been manipulated by people in power over the course of 240 some odd years to do just that. You go back to the Constitution. The Constitution never guaranteed our right to vote, not the original document. It wasn't until 1870 and the 15th Amendment was passed that the right to vote, particularly for Black men, was enshrined in the Constitution. Even then, we had to fight for the right to vote, because after Reconstruction ended in 1877, Southern states came up with all sorts of creative ways to block people from voting for nearly 100 years. Yeah. The grandfather clauses, the poll taxes, the literacy test, all sorts of traps, if you will, to prevent Black people from voting. So we had to have an actual law, the Voting Rights Act in 1965, 95 years after the original voting amendment. We had to have a law to protect that right to vote. And even that law has to come up for reauthorization every few years. And what's happened is that the Republican Party has changed from a party that supported voting rights in the era of Lincoln, and it supported voting rights even in 1965. The majority of people who voted, the majority of senators who voted against the Voting Rights Act in 1965 were Democrats.
Right.
Every person who voted against the Voting Rights Act was a Southerner.
Yeah.
But Democrats controlled the Southern seats in the Senate. So it was basically Southern Democrats who were opposed to the Voting Rights Act. So here we are now, where in 2006, George W. Bush, the Republican president, signed the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. It was unanimous vote in the United States Senate. Not a single person voted against it.
Right.
Then Barack Obama gets elected in 2008, and everything changes.
Yeah.
You start to see voting rights restrictions all across the country, in state after state. You start to see this fear that the darkening of America, the changing of the political climate, is going to wipe away white political power. And so by 2013, the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Roberts, supposed to be some moderate or something, allows the Supreme Court to gut the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County v. Holder decision. And now we are in 2022, where we have a law, the Voting Rights Act, which, as I said, was unanimously passed by the Senate. The last time it came up for reauthorization in 2006, and now not a single Republican will go on record in support of this.
I mean, it is really to the point of your book. Like, that's the only thing that's changed, right? Is that the country has grown in terms of its minority population, and I think that, and I'm not sure if this count takes in into account the election of Biden, but I know 7 of the last 8 presidential elections, the Democrat won a popular vote. And so I think as Republicans have seen this play out over time, they realize that if not for the Electoral College and if not for, restricting voting rights, then they would lose pretty much every time, at least in the White House. And I think that fear of not having control and not being able to hold on to the good old boy system is what keeps them, fighting against the natural kind of progress that we have.
We have a fear of democracy, Ted. If they really believed in democracy, they'd let everybody vote, but they don't want everybody to vote. They've actually said, you have Republicans who've gone on record and say, we don't want everybody to vote. We don't think that certain people should be voting. So they're not hiding their agenda in any way. But then they go on the record and they say stupid stuff like what Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney have said, basically accusing Joe Biden of being a partisan hack because he's supporting something that they, as a party, supported themselves a decade ago. And they're saying, oh, he's divisive. It's the most divisive. That's nonsense. I wrote a piece in the Washington Post last month about voting rights. And I mentioned that Democrats need to avoid this whole bipartisanship trap.
Yes.
The idea that the president can't be divisive, he has to be unified. That's baloney. The presidents that get things done are the presidents who are and have been divisive in certain ways. And in a sense, that's how they get reelected, because their base in their party wants to see them fighting for something. Even if they don't succeed, they want to see them fighting for that. And, I go back to the example of Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt, in his 1936 pre-election speech on Halloween, gets up there and says, the forces of entrenched opposition are aligned against me, because they are aligned and they are united in their hatred against me, and I welcome their hatred. That's something you don't hear Joe Biden say. I welcome. You can see Donald Trump saying that, but you don't see Joe Biden saying that. If you're fighting for if you're fighting for the right cause, it doesn't matter who's on your side and who's not on your side. It doesn't matter what your political party is. You just get in there and fight for it, even if it does divide people. The right to vote is fundamental to who we are as a country. The president of the United States is the chief advocate, or should be the chief advocate, for that basic right. And the extent that he hasn't been over the course of the past year will go down in history as a huge failure for this administration.
I think you're exactly right, and I don't understand the Democrats' constant, like, maybe it's like a fetish they have for like this bipartisan thing, and it's like these are the same people who are perpetuating a lie about the election was stolen. These are the same people who won't hold Trump accountable in anything that he's ever done. These are the same people who are intentionally putting laws in place to prevent people from voting. These are the same people who will not stand up and who will ignore subpoenas for the January 6th commission. Like, these are not people who are working towards unity or unification or something that is the right thing to do, so to speak. These are people who are build their entire political platforms on being divisive. They build their entire political platforms on maligning people and castigating people and saying, these people want to take your country and your jobs and your way of life. That's how they do it. And I don't understand why Democrats feel so beholden to this idea of we must coalesce and bring these people together when these people are not trying to cooperate. We can't even get all the Democrats to cooperate when it comes to voting rights and doing what it needs to take to get it done. I know we talk about Kyrsten Sinema and Manchin, but maybe even Mark Meadows, I'm not sure. And one other Democrat may not be in support of carving out the filibuster niche, right? Carving out this.
Mark Meadows was Trump's White House chief of staff. You must mean somebody else, right?
Not Mark Meadows. The other senator from Arizona.
Oh, not okay. I get what you're saying.
I can't think of his name then.
The astronaut. I can't think of his name either.
Yeah, but, him.
Gifford. What's his Gifford?
Mark Gifford. Is it Mark Gifford?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know about him either.
I was like, who are we talking about here?
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a party that when Barack Obama was in office, Mitch McConnell, the party leader, said that his fundamental priority was to make Obama a one-term president.
Right.
This is the party that wouldn't even allow Barack Obama to have a hearing for his Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland.
Right.
This is a party that has introduced hundreds of bills in state legislatures to restrict the right to vote. Mm-hmm. I don't know why anybody thinks there's a party that can be rational or reasoned with after they elected Donald Trump. That should tell you everything that you need to know about the Republican Party today.
Yeah.
But Democrats, I think, have their own issues. And one of those issues is this fantasy of attracting white moderates. The idea that the white moderates are going to flock to the Democratic Party, and we just have to we don't want to go too far to the left or anything like that because we're going to frighten away the white moderates.
Yeah.
Democrats have been trying to do this forever, and the reality is white people in general have left the Democratic Party and have done so for nearly 60 years, and they ain't coming back.
Right.
I mean, no Democratic candidate for president has won the white vote since 1964, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. Not one. That tells you everything you need to know about the direction of the party and the difference between the two parties. Because the reality is that if it weren't for white people, Republicans wouldn't have any power. They're the only racial group that votes for Republicans. Black people don't, Native Americans don't, Asian Americans don't, Latinos and Hispanics don't. I mean, white people are the party. The Republican Party is the party of white people, and white people are the party of Republicans.
Yeah. So let me ask you, thinking about what Manchin and Sinema say are their concerns, right, about the filibuster, wouldn't it stand to reason that if they really felt voting rights were important, that they'd be saying, okay, we can't do this carve out of the filibuster. We want to get this passed with the current rules, and we need 60 votes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and sit and talk to 10 Republicans we think we can win over and figure out what they will vote for. Wouldn't that seem to be like what they would be doing if they were interested in protecting voting rights?
Well, allegedly, that's what they are doing. That's what Manchin's been saying he's been doing, not only on voting rights, but on other legislation, economic legislation. But I'm not sure that even makes sense, to be honest, Ted, because the reality is there aren't 10 Republicans who'll do it. There's not even one or two Republicans who will do it. Because the Republican Party, Donald Trump said this very clearly when he was in office and before he was running for president, that the Republican Party has no chance of winning if we have Democratic elections. If we have democracy in this country, we don't have the same country we have right now. First of all, we don't have the United States Senate we have right now, as we've talked about before. We're a state like California, where I'm living in now, is 39 million people and gets 2 senators, while North Dakota and South Dakota have 1.5 million people and they have 4 senators.
Right.
White and rural, and this is a state with much more diversity of Black and brown people. That's democratic. Places like the District of Columbia, which should have statehood, they don't have statehood. Or Puerto Rico, if they wanted statehood, they don't have statehood. There's no chance of the Republicans ever supporting anything like that. They don't want anything that looks like democracy. So the notion that somehow we're going to be able to convince 10 Republicans in the United States Senate to do that is obscene. They have no interest in doing that.
But that's my point. Like, so then even if Manchin is saying this, if Sinema is saying this, it's not believable. Because they have to know what we're talking about right now is true. Like, Joe Manchin is not naive enough to think that he could get 10 Republicans to support voting rights. I just do not believe that. I think it's disingenuous, or that he's just right out lying.
Well, I mean, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have other interests too. I mean, to a certain extent, I think they're both beholden to corporate interest, corporate donors, and I don't think that they're representing truly the interests of the people in their states. I mean, there are people in Arizona and people in West Virginia who could benefit from a lot of the legislation that Joe Biden has proposed, but Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are 2 of the people who are in the Democratic Party who are remaining as obstacles to that, progress.
What do you feel like the options are as it relates to securing voting rights? If we can't get these 2 senators on board and we can't get rid of the filibuster, I mean, because Joe Biden is, doing everything and came to Atlanta and made a speech, which was performative for me.
I don't think he's done anything. I don't think he's done enough. 1 week of speeches or 1 or 2 weeks of speeches is not enough to make up for a year of neglect. This has not been on the radar screen for the Democratic Party elite, the establishment, and the White House for nearly a year. Yeah. What they should have done is made it a priority from the very beginning and explain that every other issue depends on voting rights. The ability to pass COVID relief, and we have people who were getting relief from the COVID bill have lost their payments now because of the filibuster. I mean, the ability to pass the Build Back Better bill, that's also locked up because of the filibuster. The ability to raise the minimum wage, the ability to pass immigration reform, the ability to do police reform, the ability to do any issue that people care about, that people who at least voted for Joe Biden care about, is going to be blocked from now until the end of a year at least. It may be the end of his administration unless something dramatic happens in the November elections. But Republicans have no incentive to go to the negotiating table and work with him now. His popularity is lower. He hasn't accomplished what some of the major goals he wanted, the progressive wanted to accomplish. And so they're just going to sit on the sidelines and watch it all crumble.
But so again, raises this question: is there anything rather that could be done to protect voting rights?
I think the president still has power. And, the 3 areas where I think the president has power. One, regardless of what happens with Congress, one is the power of appointments. The president can appoint and nominate people. Sometimes they have to be confirmed by the Senate, and that confuses things or complicates things. But the appointments themselves, the nomination itself, is a statement from the president. 2, the president has the power of the bully pulpit. The president can speak and make any issue a priority. The president can go to Congress and deliver a joint speech to a joint session of Congress about voting rights. The president could have a primetime address from the Oval Office about voting rights. The president could go to West Virginia and go to Arizona and campaign with Kamala Harris, and they got so upset about that, about voting rights. The president could go over the heads of those people in those states. The president could lean on those members of the Senate in the LBJ style and threaten them that you're not going to get another damn thing through the United States Senate to help your people unless you do this for me.
I don't think any of those things changes anything. Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like he should do all of those things. I think the only way that he's able to get this change is he would, and I don't think Biden would ever do this. In my opinion, he'd have to be Trump-esque. Like, he'd have to talk about Manchin and Sinema on a regular basis. He had to meet with them.
That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is putting pressure on the president can raise the temperature on this issue. Like I'm saying, when I'm saying going to their states, I'm not saying he's going to go there and talk positively about them. I'm going to say he's go there and bash them. That was the whole point. he has to raise the temperature. Plus, the president has the power of executive orders too. The president can do certain things through executive order. Can also work with the Justice Department. I don't know if he can't really direct the Justice Department, the Attorney General, like Trump tried to do. But if he had a stronger Attorney General than Merrick Garland, maybe the Justice Department could be more aggressive in pursuing some of these cases in state after state. But the president does have power. The president just has to make this a priority. And that doesn't mean you're going to win. Right. But it does raise the temperature. It does generate more pressure. You're going to get a lot of backlash from the so-called establishment saying he's being divisive. Who the hell cares? You're going to get a lot of backlash from Sinema and Manchin and their crew. And who the hell cares? Because they're not on board with anything you're trying to do anyway. Right. So, I mean, if you're going to go down, at least go down fighting. At least the base will be supportive of you because they see you fighting. But if you just give up, nobody's going to support you. You're going to lose. The right's never going to support you. The left is going to lose confidence in you. The middle won't see that you've done anything for them. So who are you winning by doing this?
Nobody. And I think that's really my frustration as well. It's like, even if you can't get it done, like, fight for it. Like, I would be having conversations with, Black media outlets, talking to them in simplest terms as possible about what this process is, because people, don't sometimes understand the nuances of the process. And so you see people saying, well, Biden's not doing this and Biden's not doing this. Well, I'm like, he's not a king or emperor. He can't pass voting rights, right? That has to come through the Congress. But what he can do is these things. So I think if he's able to say, look, I'm going to continue to fight for this. I'm going to continue to talk about it regularly. I'm going to continue to go to West Virginia and Arizona. I'm going to continue to have conversations with the senators directly. Whatever we need to do, I'm going to keep pushing for this. But here are the numbers, right? Here's the math. 100 senators. We need 60 this way. Unless we change the rules, then we need 50. We don't have the 50. We got 48. That's not complicated. We got 48. We need these two. So maybe that means everybody starts to talk about it more, right? But he has to lead much more aggressively on this issue in order to change it. Again, I still don't think, with the exception of, like, I don't know, like something really, I don't even know what could happen that could change their minds. I really don't. But I feel like he has to fight for it. And what I will say is this. I also think that the DNC should be vocal about not supporting Sinema and Manchin financially moving forward.
I don't think they care. I think that they might think that actually helps them. So I'm not sure that they actually care about that, about the DNC support. I mean, there's an argument that, that it could be useful, but there's also an argument that they could use that to their benefit. So, especially in states that are swing states, to show that they're not beholden to the party. The last thing they want to be is to get the perception that they are beholden to the party.
Sure.
And we have swing state elections coming up this year in the midterms in the Senate. There's an election in Arizona this year. There's an election in Georgia this year. So we've got the whole Democratic agenda is on the line this year. And the problem is, I don't get the impression that anybody in the party is acting in a way that suggests that they understand the gravity of the threat. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I kind of go back to the Obama era with this too. I think I love Barack Obama for many things that he did and the example he set. But I think that the tone of bipartisanship that he tried to create, which also failed, the tone of collegiality, he was attacked for being divisive, and even when he was trying to bend over backward to accommodate the Republican interest. Yeah. Republicans don't care about bipartisanship and collegiality. They just use that as a cudgel to attack Democrats because they know that Democrats pretend to care about that. So I think Democrats should just stop talking about that and start talking about accomplishing things. Who cares? I don't think, they always find some white people in middle America who claim that they care. Why can't the parties get along? Who the hell cares about those people? Those people don't know who the hell they want to vote for anyway. There are people out there who do know what they want. Those are people who I think are persuadable. There are a lot of people on the left who are persuadable, people of color who are persuadable, who would come out to vote if they saw a party that was passionate about fighting for their interests. They do not see that right now.
That's very true. You talk about, I want to pivot a bit. You talk about the interesting thing about this in the title of your book, Race Against Time. Explain, what do you mean by race against time?
Literally, we are in a race against time right now. Time tells us demographically that America is changing. In fact, the Census Bureau came out with a report in 2015, a few months before Donald Trump announced his campaign, saying that by the year 2044, white people will no longer be the majority of the country.
Mm-hmm.
That's devastating to the ego of white America, to the white supremacists in white America.
Yeah.
The idea they were potentially losing their majority in just a few decades down the road. Then we get Donald Trump, and we get this whole backlash against the demographic change that are taking place. We get fights about critical race theory and all kinds of obnoxiously offensive, intellectually dishonest conversations that essentially focus on race.
Yeah.
I mean, the debate about immigration, the debate about terrorism, the debate about schools, the debate about COVID, they're all essentially about race in this country. That is the preeminent issue that has dominated our political discourse since the beginning, and has become even more so in recent years. So what this means is that white America realizes that their time is limited. Not all white Americans when I say this, but the white Americans who are afraid of this change realize their time is limited, and they're doing everything they can to prevent it from happening. They're electing people like Trump. They're passing new voting restriction laws. They're leaning into these restrictions like the Senate filibuster, or even the Senate rules itself. Anything that keeps in place the white majority, the white power structure, they're going to continue to perpetuate that. Even while people of color are openly challenging and saying, why do we have this undemocratic system? Why do we have this constitution that's undemocratic? Why is it that Democrats have won the popular vote, as you said, in 7 of the last 8 elections, but they don't control any power? They don't even control the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been tilted to the right because of this system that we have that needs to be changed.
Yeah,
Joe Biden could do something about that. He could appoint more Supreme Court justices too. But I think that there's a lot of people say, oh, well, you can't do that because the Congress. You know what? Franklin Roosevelt led the effort. I don't agree with everything Franklin Roosevelt did. He had a lot of racially problematic policies, but he led the effort to fight for the New Deal and the Second New Deal. He didn't care. I mean, I don't know if he really didn't care, but he acted as though he didn't care what the consequences were. And people like that. They like people who fight. Even somebody like Harry Truman. Harry Truman used to go around barnstorming in his campaigns, and people would say, "Give him hell, Harry," at his campaign stuff. And he would say, "I'm just telling the truth," and they think it's hell. People want to see somebody like that. They want to see a fighter who's willing to go out there and take it to them. I mean, we don't have to all get along, all agree, but we all have to believe in the concept of democracy. And if the president wants to be considered divisive because he's fighting for democracy, then I have no problem with that at all.
I think that is why some folks what some people actually liked about Trump, even though he was, shallow and misguided, he appeared to be fighting, right? And people liked that about him. I will say too that I think where we are with the Biden administration and his approach, for me, it's off-putting that even as we talk about like expanding the Supreme Court and things like that, he just seems to be. Well, he is a moderate. I mean, and I think to some degree, I think he's a moderate, but I'm not surprised that he's not going harder based on how he campaigned, based on the fact that he said, I'm willing to have a conversation about giving away, reducing student debt by 10,000, but not by 50,000, which would actually make a difference in people's lives. And I just don't really understand the why. Like why won't you respond to the desires and the interests of the majority of the people in this country, because that's the people, those are the people who voted for you. And I think that you have a responsibility. If these people elected you, if people got up and voted for you and gave to your campaign and did the thing they needed to do for you to win, it is incumbent upon you at that point to deliver the things those people want, not to kind of half-ass it because you're concerned about people on the right who don't support you at all. And I just don't understand that thinking.
And never will. I mean, I think there's this mentality in the Democratic Party that some people believe that we can't go too far or do too much because then people will think we're just like Trump or we're divisive and all these things. I'm sure Biden feels to a certain extent he doesn't want to come across as being like Trump either. But guess what? they already think he's like Trump in the sense that all the things that we knew that Trump was doing, they're accusing Biden of doing now. They have a whole slogan, "Let's go, Brandon," which is basically "F you" to the president of the United States. They don't care about his bipartisanship. They don't care he's a moderate white man. They're going after him like he's Barack Obama, and not even Barack Obama, but like he's Al Sharpton as Barack Obama. and he's pretending like, everything's normal. We're just going to keep talking. We're going to negotiate. I'm going to have confidence, put on my sunglasses and aviators, and I'm going to project a sense of confidence. Well, the whole world is burning around you, Joe. It's not going to work. Right. And what bothers me most is that Joe Biden came into office. Remember, I think even his very first campaign commercial talked about Charlottesville. Remember that? Charlottesville. Yes. When he announced his campaign, he said, "This is the fight for the soul of America." He said that recently, even in the context of voting rights.
Yes.
Well, if it's a battle for the soul of America, as he says, then act like it's a battle. Arm your soldiers with all the weapons so they can win. Don't come in half-assed, as you say, in a battle and fighting, the Marquis of Queensberry rules. You have to fight aggressively in the same way your enemy is fighting, or else you're going to lose.
Yes.
If it's a battle for the soul of America, as Biden claims it is,
then
I want to see evidence that he really is acting that way.
The gloves should be off.
Exactly.
And they're not. So speaking of that, he's traveled around with Vice President Harris. What is your assessment of how the Vice President has done, and the criticism that she's getting, taking into account that she is the first woman and she's also a person of color?
Well, I think unless there's some dramatic change, her career has taken a downward turn in the past year because of her association with Joe Biden. And I don't know whether she agrees with the policies that his administration has put forth or not, but the fact that she can't really say that she disagrees puts her in an awkward position because Biden is unpopular. So that unpopularity trickles down to her. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, she also gets all the blame for everything that Biden does wrong and none of the credit if Biden does anything right.
Right.
And I think that I don't know what her political ambitions are or whether she plans to run for office as president at some point in the future. But unless she finds a way to distance herself from Joe Biden, I don't know if that's going to be possible because I think the people on the left, I don't know how she'd ever win a primary when people on the left aren't really happy with what the Biden administration has done. So that's very problematic for her. Meanwhile, I can't necessarily fault her entirely because she's in this unwinnable position. And I don't know what else she could do under the circumstances. Maybe she's giving advice for Biden to do exactly the opposite of what he's doing. He's not listening. I don't know. Maybe she'll say that at some point. But at this point, there's not much she can do. And that poses a serious problem for her.
Do you think it would be different if he had chosen another Black woman? If he had chosen Val Demings or Stacey Abrams, do you think they would have the same thing happen?
I don't think it makes it. I think whoever he had chosen would be compromised because Biden is unpopular. Biden is the president. The buck stops there. He makes decisions, not the vice president. Right. And the vice president, has to suffer the consequences of that. And right now, Biden is very unpopular with the left and the right and the middle. So, like I said, until he does something to change that trajectory, she's hitched her star to his wagon. Mm-hmm. If he somehow manages to pull out of this and do something to turn things around, then she could move forward as well. But I don't like to rule anything out in politics because anything can change. We could have a crisis. We could have a terrorist attack. We could have a natural disaster. Something that could unite the country, or a war, even, God forbid. Probably wouldn't unite the country unless there was a direct attack. Right. But we could have something that could change the course of the trajectory. I saw this in the Bush administration, when the second Bush administration, when George W. Bush came in, widely unpopular after the whole controversy in the Bush versus Gore election scandal, where he won by 537 votes. But then September 11th happened. Yep. And suddenly his popularity skyrocketed. He had 90% popularity. Yeah. So, you never know what could happen by November, but at this point, unless there's something dramatic, then it doesn't look good. The other thing is, I hate to say this, but I've said it before, so why not? a lot of people don't necessarily expect Joe Biden to run for president again in 2024. I don't know. I don't know why they think that, because I think he would. But they also, a lot of people think that he might die in office too. Because he's older, and that might be an opportunity for Kamala Harris to come in and become president and change things around, take a different policy course. She'll get criticized a lot for anything she does, left, right, or center. But, she came in and acted as an aggressive fighter for the causes that the base believed in.
Yeah.
She may not win in 2024, but at least people would respect her moxie and her fight for doing that.
You think if Biden runs again in 24, that she would stay on the ticket?
I don't see any reason why she wouldn't. I think it would be devastating. I think it would be a bad move for Biden to replace her with somebody who wasn't a Black woman. Who's he going to replace her with? A white man? That's not going to
Yeah, that's not going to go over well. I mean, yeah, no. I get frustrated by it because I agree with your assessment.
That's not the problem. It's Joe Biden.
No, I agree.
I'm not saying that Kamala Harris is great. I don't know that she is or isn't. I don't know what advice she's giving, but she's not the problem. It's Joe Biden.
But she gets blamed again, to your point, by everybody, and it frustrates me when I see, especially when I see a conversation. I saw a conversation a few weeks back on the Black media space, just saying, blaming Kamala Harris for us not having voting rights passed. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, this is a ridiculous conversation to be having. She literally, as the vice president, what power does she have?
Well, the problem is that the Biden administration gave her this portfolio. They gave her the portfolio of being in charge of voting rights, which was an unwinnable cause, the way they were fighting it. And they gave her the portfolio of being in charge of immigration, another unwinnable cause, like two things that Republicans never going to go along with in the first place. So they kind of set her up for failure. And
she can't go out and say things that the president isn't saying already.
Exactly.
So,
but I mean, she took the job. She knew what the challenges were. She knew what the opportunities were. So this is.
Yeah, I get it, but I still think that the criticism of her from Black media spaces saying, what is she doing about voting rights is misguided. Like,
I agree with you. I don't think that. Well, first of all, I don't know what she's doing. I can't say that she's doing nothing. I assume she's doing something, but I don't really know what it is. But I do believe that whatever she's doing, she's following the marching orders of the president.
Yes.
The worst thing that she could do from her point of view in terms of her loyalty to the president is to say things that are incongruous with the president's agenda. The vice president exists in our country to serve the president, and people may think that when originally that wasn't the case. We know this because in the beginning of the Constitution, the vice president was the person who came in second in the election.
Right.
And those people didn't necessarily work in the same interest. But now we have a different constitutional system, and the vice president basically runs on a ticket with the president and serves the president's interest.
What do you for those who've been listening earlier, the senator from Arizona is Mark Kelly. Thank you to producer Chris. Mark Kelly, not Mark Meadows. I recently, a few weeks ago, there was a email of sorts sent out saying, hey, if you want to get free at-home COVID tests, just click this link. You can get those, and here you go. How do you feel like the Biden administration is doing with COVID and handling the COVID crisis? I should sing the Jeopardy music.
Yeah, I keep being fair about this. I don't think they've handled. I mean, first of all, I think they've handled it better than the Trump administration, but that's a very low bar.
Sure.
But secondly, I don't think they've handled it as effectively as anybody has wanted. COVID and Afghanistan have been, I think, those were the two issues last summer of 2021 that started to cause Biden's popularity to plummet. It was the Delta variant of COVID in summer of 2021 and the withdrawal from Afghanistan. He had a lot of goodwill, in the winter and spring when he came into office after Trump and created all this chaos. People were happy to get rid of Trump, happy to get rid of all the drama. Things are going well. They passed the rescue plan. They got $1.9 trillion out of that. He had this ambitious agenda. Things seemed like they were going well. And then June came, and June 2021. And then Delta variant shut everything down. And then July, we had the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was a debacle.
Yeah.
And by September, his popularity had cratered. So I think that those two issues really started the spiral downward for Biden. And unfortunately, COVID isn't something that they've gotten control over. Now, the reality is, you know this because you live in Georgia and I'm in California, but I've traveled across the country a lot in the course of the past year or so. And I see there's a huge disparity in the way COVID is treated. I mean, in New York and Los Angeles, you see people wearing masks outdoors.
Yeah.
And if you go to Florida and Texas, and I presume in Georgia, people don't even wear masks indoors.
Right.
We have governors in those states who are working against creating public health policies that actually could positively help eliminate the crisis. So we have like two different approaches to this in this country. And Biden doesn't have control over all that, but he can exercise some leadership. And unfortunately, the CDC hasn't been as consistent as people would want it to be. Everything has become politicized. I mean, I still blame Donald Trump for this whole thing. If Donald Trump had exercised real leadership from the beginning instead of making it into a blame game for everybody else, we might not be in the depth of the crisis we're in right now. And I honestly believe, the one thing that I have to give credit to Barack Obama for, I mean, except for the healthcare rollout of the website, the Obama administration was known for no drama. I mean, because they were focused on competence, and I think that they competently, as much as they could, ran a fairly efficient ship of state. I haven't seen that same level of competence in the Biden administration. Certainly, we saw none of it in the Trump administration. So my sense is that if Obama had been president, that maybe we might have had a more competent response from the beginning. Although I suspect we still would have had the same sort of politicization of the crisis, about people not wanting to wear masks at first, and then not wanting to stay home, and not not wanting to be vaccinated. But I think that having a president in power who was articulating a message that was echoing the public health sentiment from the beginning would have been useful.
I think so. I think you're exactly right. I do find it interesting that obviously a lot of Republicans, are not supportive of mask wearing or vaccines more than Democrats. I'll say that in terms of percentages. But I'm also finding a lot of Black people in faith spaces are anti-science as it relates to this. They're pushing back against vaccine. Say again?
Are you surprised by that, Ted Winn?
I actually am.
That surprises you? That doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, let me tell you why it surprises me. Because the impact of it have been felt so deeply in Black faith spaces. There was a point in time, March, February, well, maybe like maybe not March. Like
all the Black pastors were dying.
Yeah, Black bishops and pastors and women in faith spaces, and I know people who've had family members, and it's just like.
But there's a disconnect. There's a commonality in the rhetoric and the language of faith communities, regardless of whether they're Black or white. And the whole use of the word faith articulates that commonality. I remember being in Texas in the early few weeks of the COVID pandemic, at a local copying place to pick up some copies for my mom for something, whatever. I can't remember what I was doing, but there was an old white guy with overalls, thick Texas accent, kind of this prototypical Texan, you think, with no mask on. And there was, I think, an Indian woman at the counter, and she asked him, "Why aren't you wearing a mask?" And she said, "Oh, I'm protected by the blood." I could totally, I mean, it seems like a ridiculously idiotic thing to say, but I could totally see Black Christians saying the exact same thing.
Well, I think that's because a lot of the ideas in terms of how Black people in more conservative Black faith spaces do religion is a reflection of, white folks. That's who gave them those ideas to begin with. So it's not like they have different ideas.
Especially in the South, Ted, especially in the South.
Well, I'm talking about people in California and in the Midwest and New York. I ain't talking about just people in the South. I'm talking about Black faith people around the country whom I know personally and have seen really disturbing things that they have posted. And it never cites anything scientific or anything, like medical research. It's just kind of like, I'm going to take, sea moss and I'm going to, drink my my
Just
juices. Huh?
we have a lot of misinformed people in the world. We have a lot of misinformed people in the Black community. The difference is that those misinformed people in the past didn't always have a platform. And if they did have a platform, people weren't taken seriously because they were reputable people who could respond to them and get things straight. We
Yeah.
don't have that same sort of sense of clarity right now. And so you have people making ridiculous comments, about their cousins, friends, whatever, who are taking the vaccine and supposedly their balls are swelling up or shrinking or something like that. And all these things are just, it's all these anecdotal evidentiary studies from people with no medical degrees, no scientific background, and other people are ill-advised enough to follow that information and believe that, because nobody wants to follow the big pharma, the medical establishment. There's a conspiracy. I grant you the big pharma is out to make money, and medical establishment doesn't always give the right advice. But you know what? In this case, they say even a broke clock is right twice a day. Doesn't mean everything they do is wrong.
Right.
And, if I see Bill Gates and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Donald Trump all taking the vaccine, and they all come from different backgrounds, and they're all very successful, privileged people. Yeah. Why do I think that I wouldn't want, if there was some sort of conspiracy or cabal out there to against Black people, they wouldn't necessarily be given to all these people. These people wouldn't be out there taking it themselves. So, yeah. I think use your brains, people. Use your brains. Stop listening to idiots on the internet who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I saw an article in Forbes magazine that said, actually, don't do your own research.
Right, because you don't even know where to begin. Look, I have a degree. I have 2 Ivy League degrees. I have a degree from Harvard, and yet I don't know everything about science. What really smart people know is they know when they don't know something. Yes. They know how to find reputable people, reputable authorities who actually can give them information. It's critical thinking. It's being able to discern the difference between some dude on the internet, on Facebook, who says something, and a scientist who actually spent 30 years or 40 years studying this issue.
Or they'll be like, but there are
between those two. It can't. And yes, you can understand that these scientists may not always be right. I get that. But if you can't distinguish between those two, then you're not engaging in serious critical thinking.
No, you're not. But what they'll do is they'll do what one of my relatives did, and he was like, "Well, I listen to these other scientists who, they're." And I'm like, "So listening to what, the 5% of scientists? Like, so just dismiss the majority of scientists and virologists and immunologists, people who've been doing this for decades, and listen to these people over here." I'm like, you're always going to have, those people. Like, you can have a conversation with Black
people have said too. Those crazy people have said, like the guy in Florida. The chief scientist in Florida, the Surgeon General of Florida, or Ronnie Jackson, Trump's former doctor. These people, if they have other controversial political views and they're Trump supporters and they think that Trump won the election, and yet they somehow also believe the vaccines are not right, well, maybe you shouldn't quite listen to them because they're not really all there.
Right.
I mean, at this point, except for the fact that this is still disproportionately affecting Black people, I'm actually kind of over the idea of trying to protect people who are too dumb to protect themselves.
Yeah,
I just don't want our people, Black people, to be swept up in all this nonsense.
Yeah.
But if all these other people want to be dumb enough not to take the vaccine, not to wear a mask, not to social distance, and just continue living their lives, and they die from it, I don't really have a great deal of sympathy for that group. I do have sympathy for Black people because I do feel like we've been misled. Not just by ourselves, but by the system that is designed to mislead us and to create this sort of confusion and conflama. But, for these other people, folks, you have all the information in front of you.
Yeah. We're in 2022, obviously. And so this is going to be the year for midterm elections, some gubernatorial races and some other races that we see coming up and people position themselves for. There's been this kind of media narrative that's been disturbing for me, and it is one that has already given the House to the Republicans and, and maybe the Senate. And I just don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's a true reflection. Like when we had the two elections we had recently, last year, were the Virginia governor's race and the New Jersey's governor's race, to be specific. So the media coverage I saw was the New Jersey governor barely won. He eked it out, right? And that was a whole news story. When traditionally the party in power loses after the, during a presidential election. So the fact that he won, even if it was by 1 point, was different. And that should have been what was being covered, was that he actually still won as opposed to he barely won. Well, he wasn't statistically.
New Jersey, the Democrats won too, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The Democrats won too, but that didn't get much attention. Phil Burr, who cares? No, move on.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean specifically. Like in New Jersey, like he won, but he got like a little bit of, he barely won. And then in Virginia, with
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about Virginia. You never met him.
Yeah, but now with Virginia, with Youngkin winning, it was like, oh my God, McAuliffe lost. Like, well, with the exception of the year Barack Obama, I think, won the first time, again, the party changes opposite the president normally in Virginia. So that wasn't unprecedented. It's what normally happens. So I really didn't like the fact of how it was being covered. Compare that to in Georgia during that same election cycle,
right.
43 Democrats won in state elections and only 6 Republicans won. That's a news story in this state. And I just don't like how this coverage is happening, because I think it influences if people turn out to vote.
Well, I understand that. I think you make a good point. I think people have to separate voter sentiment from election results. Those are two different things. The voter sentiment is clearly aligned, in my opinion, with the left. The voter sentiment, as we see from presidential elections, as we see in even those recent elections, but not even that, just in terms of public opinion polls and surveys, we can see the voter sentiment is in favor of change. They want to raise the minimum wage. They want to expand healthcare. They want to make sure we fix the schools and provide aid for people who are attending college or cancel college debt to a certain extent. They want to make sure we do something about homelessness and housing. They want to. The voter sentiment is actually very positive on a lot of issues, including gun control, believe it or not. But voter sentiment isn't reflected in actual election results, because elections are rigged against democracy, and so that's part of the problem. But I do think that there's a few issues that need to be considered about the midterms. One is voter suppression. One is gerrymandering, which is an incredibly important issue.
Can you explain to people what that is, for those who don't know what gerrymandering is?
Gerrymandering is when every 10 years, the United States, the Constitution authorizes state legislatures to redraw election maps for Congress every 10 years based on where the population is in those states. And what happens in a lot of instances that partisan state legislatures will gerrymander a district so that it creates this weird kind of form and shape to go wherever they want the district to go in order to cut off a particular group of people. So if they want to make sure that Democrats lose, they can create districts so that Democrats lose, even though Democrats may be the majority of the state. So that's what gerrymandering is. And Democrats have a bill in Congress, the Freedom to Vote Act, which would actually, I'm not sure if it's included in the Freedom to Vote Act, but it was included in the For the People Act, which would eliminate partisan gerrymandering. And so that didn't get anywhere last year. Right. So anyway, what I was saying is, yes, the election results this year are complicated, but voter suppression will have an impact. Gerrymandering will have an impact, and voter enthusiasm will have an impact. And I don't think that any of those things is a reflection of voter sentiment, though. Those are two different things. So yes, it's likely that the Republicans will win control of the House because of those historical precedents that we talked about before. Also because of the voter suppression that's taking place to make it harder for Black and brown people to vote, quite frankly. Also because of the gerrymandering of congressional districts, which even if Democrats win a majority of the votes in a particular state, they could still end up losing the state, losing the majority of the seats. And also because of the voter sentiment, because a lot of voters who are in the base don't feel that they're very excited about turning out this year because they haven't seen the deliverables. Those three things: voter sentiment, the voter passion, the voter suppression, and the gerrymandering could have enormous impact on what happens in the election. But that doesn't change the larger trajectory, which is the voter sentiment. The voters themselves in this country are still left of center. What bothers me is I hear people look at a particular election result and say, oh, that means that the New York Times, I think it was New York Times and Washington Post did some ridiculous article about this the other day saying, oh, the left's agenda is blown up and it's now unpopular. It's not unpopular. It got stopped by a system that was designed to stop it.
Yes.
Two different things. And people need to understand that. Failure does not mean the ideas are unpopular. The ideas are still as popular as they were before.
Right.
It's just that there are systemic obstacles in place to prevent those changes from happening.
Yeah, I think those are important points that people really need to pay attention to. And I think that because we are aware of that, for those of us who are aware of it, then, those persons who help to organize voting have to take into account what the rules might be, what the new rules might be, what the new obstacles might be, and create workarounds for those and really try to inform people as much as possible and detail how important it is for us to show up in the midterms. I think one of the other things, again, that where you should have some coordination is between the White House and the state election officials, helping to people to, again, understand how important it is for us to gain a majority in the Senate. I don't know if it's going to happen, but the things that we could get done and why things aren't being done. I think President Biden has to continue to do the things we talked about earlier, use the bully pulpit, go to Virginia, go to Arizona. I just see an event in Arizona not that long ago where people were having this rally to talk about voting rights and the importance of it. But I think if that was to happen and you have people partnering with state election officials or people who work on the ground trying to get people to the polls, maybe that gives us a better chance. But I think if we don't take extreme measures, then we're going to be in a pickle. And we all know that if the Democrats lose the House, then it's a wrap. Literally nothing's going to get done except what the president can pass by executive order. Or can do by executive order.
I'm not convinced that anything is getting done right now, or that will get done right now because.
Well, we did have an infrastructure bill. We got something.
Well, yeah, that was the one that was palatable to everybody. I mean, the infrastructure's historically been bipartisan in the first place.
Right.
But in terms of the Build Back Better agenda, that was what Biden ran on. That didn't go anywhere. A lot of the provisions of the American Rescue Plan have expired in terms of the payment, the monthly payments that were going out to people through 2021. Democrats now are in the unenviable position of having people lose money in their administration. Who wants that to happen? But I think that the issue at hand is really about deliverables. Mm-hmm. There have to be some deliverables to the party, to the party base, in order for people to want to come out to vote. Now, there are ways to overcome that, and one is to elect candidates who aren't sort of milquetoast candidates who can stand up and advocate for what they believe in. And I think the party needs to recruit those people, but I don't see any evidence that's doing that. But not in all cases. But that's how you get the base turned out. Either you give them some deliverable or you give them a candidate they can get excited about.
I think that's true. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, in a national election, but I am ecstatic about what's happening in my state of Georgia. I'm ecstatic about Stacey Abrams running for governor. I think she has a really great chance of winning. I don't know what will happen in the Georgia State House, but I think to your point, her being on the ballot will help Warnock. Her being on the ballot will help other Democrats who are running in the state, because I think people will show up because she's an exciting candidate. That could also play out in Florida. I don't live in Florida, so I don't want to, speculate too much, but I think Val Demings running is a good thing. I don't think Marco Rubio is an easy candidate to beat. I think it'll be a challenge, but I think it's doable. So we'll see, what happens there. I'm not sure what's happening in some of the other states in that way, but those two races are interesting. I'm also curious to see what's going to happen in New York. I know that Letitia James withdrew from the race. Yeah, I think she would have won if she had run.
I'm not sure about that. By the way, can I take a break? Use the bathroom.
We'll edit it out of this video. Yes, go.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Did we just take a bathroom break?
How do we edit that?
I'll edit it before you say. I'll probably have to say edit it before you talk about Tisha James.
Okay. Oh God. See, this is what happens when you do stuff with your friends. They just random drinking protein shakes.
So I always get a couple of good quotables from these. He said, "What really smart people know is when they don't know something."
Yeah, it's very true.
That's beautiful.
I didn't want to start. I want to call people's names, but I mean, it's ridiculous at this point. The stuff people are talking about. Oh, I didn't see. Okay, I'm going to ask this question.
Woo!
Yeah, we'll edit that out.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll remove ourselves and you can continue the conversation.
I'm not gonna make it. How long is this going on?
I'm almost done.
Okay, that's fine.
You said you have something in 5 minutes?
What'd you say?
You said you have something in 5 minutes?
Oh no, I was saying I was struggling for the last 5 minutes.
Oh,
I gotta use the
sorry.
bathroom. How much are we?
And he kept going to the next question. All right, yeah, he'll edit that out. All right, so we're back here. All right, so I do have a couple other questions before we wrap. How do you think we, as a party and as a people, galvanize the base with the lack of excitement around Biden? How do we not let Biden cost us state house elections and gubernatorial races?
Well, I think part of it is like we were saying before about candidates. We have to have interesting, exciting candidates. You know, it's part of the reason why I hear a lot. So much of the discourse I hear is, you know, especially on social media, it's just stupid. And it bothers me. People left and right, people don't really understand the way politics works. I'm very progressive on almost every issue, but there's a lot of people who think, oh, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party are just the same. I see people posting crap like that. I think you are an idiot if you think that. I need to come up with a better word than idiot, but you are not, and you're not advocating, you're not really helping the cause by saying that. Yes, the Democratic Party is a flawed party with lots of problems, and the leadership of the party is flawed itself. But you can't say you have people like Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and Jumaane Williams, you know, all in this one party.
Ayanna Pressley.
They're all corporate. No, of course not. It's a party that's in transition. There's a party. There are some people in the party like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, to a certain extent Joe Biden, who are very problematic. But that doesn't mean that the party itself can be entirely defined by that, because there are exciting candidates out there who don't necessarily subscribe to those old-time views. People like Cori Bush, who ran against Clay in St. Louis, Missouri, and beat him, the Clay machine, which I've known about my entire life from being from St. Louis. And yes, the party is not perfect, but there are people in the party who do represent my interests, even if the party leadership doesn't always do so. So I think people have to understand the distinction between the two. And they also have to, the party and people who are not even the leaders in the party have to recruit exciting candidates that people can get behind. You know, Terry McAuliffe was not an exciting candidate in Virginia. Let me just say that. From the moment I heard he was running, I was like, how many times this guy run for a governor or a senator or something, or been DNC chair or whatever? He's been around the White House, the Clintons and all this stuff. I mean, come on, can't we come up with something more interesting than these old white guys who've been around the block 1,000 times? That was one of the reasons why I didn't support Joe Biden when he ran for president. It's like, can't we come up with somebody more interesting than old white guys who've been around the block over and over and over again? That's not who the Democratic Party is. And yet the Democratic leadership continues to put up these old white guys who've been around the block over and over again.
Yeah, well, who are not progressive, who are not.
Hey, bring out some young progressive people of color and who are excited, and have them run for office. That'll generate the base. Even when Barack Obama nominated Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, I was thinking, why did he nominate this boring old white guy, you know, to be on the Supreme Court when he could have nominated a progressive woman of color, you know, a progressive black woman to be on the Supreme Court? That would have at least motivated the base to fight for her. But who wants to fight for another old white guy to be on the Supreme Court?
Well, I think that is. We'll do another episode to talk about the Obama
And I'm not
presidency.
saying that race equates to political identity or political affiliation or beliefs, but I'm just saying that, if you are an old white guy and you are also moderate, that's not really helpful. I know there are people who are old white guys like Bernie Sanders who are very progressive. So don't jump on my case and say that Keith Boykin only cares about race, blah, blah, blah. I hate when people say stupid stuff like that. Like, I didn't think about all the other stuff. But, but still, you got to give people something to be excited about.
Yeah.
I don't want to vote for any more old white guys who are moderate for anything. I want to vote for exciting young people of color. I want to vote for the future of the party, the future of the country. And even if it alienates some people, it's going to motivate a lot more people than it alienates, I think. At least definitely in the base, it will get people to come out in the base and be excited about their vote. I
think so. People will feel seen. They'll feel represented. And that's why early on when I saw the candidates coming out, my first choice was Julian Castro, because I felt like he was smart. He was a person of color. He understood the issues that people of color deal with. I thought that he was, would be considerate of what everybody needs in the country, but wouldn't push our needs to the side, right, to kind of be in this center acceptable space. And as you know very well, my number 2 pick was
Pete Buttigieg.
Was Mayor Pete.
I understand how you supported him, because I was like, Pete Buttigieg. Are you kidding me?
And then after I met him and dialogued with him a little bit, I was even more sure of my support for him. And I think for Pete Buttigieg. And I don't know if I think he would have been elected, but I think he would have been a much better president than what we have right now, for sure.
Well, my critique of Pete Buttigieg, I don't think any president would. I think Biden has some problems, and I'm not sure that Pete Buttigieg would have been a better president right now, to be honest. But I do think he's a smart person. But my critique about Pete Buttigieg was the same critique I think I mentioned to you before, which wasn't so much about his intellect. It was really about his privilege. The idea that he, as the mayor of a small town in Indiana, could be taken seriously as a candidate to raise as much money as he did with no background, no experience, especially as we complain about Trump being so inexperienced, just seemed inexplicable to me that people would put this guy forward as a candidate. It made no sense. Now, I could see he might run again now after he's been transportation secretary, but at the time before, there was another guy who ran, as I mentioned to you many times before, Wayne Messam, who was the mayor of Miramar, Florida, I believe, black guy. Nobody ever talked about him. He was a mayor of a much larger city than Pete Buttigieg was, but he didn't get any attention that Pete Buttigieg did.
No, he didn't.
There was a lot about somebody, and I don't care. There's a lot of smart people out there. It doesn't mean they are qualified to or ready to be president of the United States.
I don't disagree with that. I think he was, and I think comparing him to Trump I don't think he's incomparable. I think that's not a fair analogy. Like Trump didn't hold any political office, not even as mayor of a small town, and he's not an intellectual, and he's not smart, and he's a liar, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think those things are comparative in that way.
Sarah Palin was the mayor of a small town, and
who?
Sarah Palin was the mayor of a small town.
But Sarah Palin, again, is not a smart person, so that's not comparable.
But I'm smart. Being smart is not the only qualification for being president. We've had a lot of smart presidents who screwed up as president over the course of our lifetime.
We had a lot of unsmart presidents too.
Yeah,
in recent times, the Democrats have had scholarly presidents in Obama, in Clinton.
Obama was very smart, but we didn't necessarily accomplish some of the progressive agenda that people on the left wanted. But I mean,
because he wasn't a progressive, and that's what I'm saying. Pete is smart and he's a progressive, and I think that's why
Pete Buttigieg was a progressive. He didn't run that way. I mean, he backtracked on a lot of issues, and healthcare reform, I think, was one of those issues. So. I mean, that's the concern I have too about a lot of these people who are conveniently progressive when they're running for office. I don't have a history or track record to show that they really will be that way when the controversy hits. And so I don't even like Bernie Sanders, but I trust Bernie Sanders more than I trust Pete Buttigieg, because I feel like Bernie Sanders wouldn't back out. And I didn't vote for Bernie Sanders for anything. But
I'm with you on that.
I'm not sure I know. Maybe I'm getting a better understanding of Pete. By the way, I don't have anything against Pete Buttigieg. I actually like him. I just don't think he should be president of the United States. I had similar opinions about Andrew Yang. I get confused sometimes because my former researcher says his name's Andrew Wang, and so I have to stop and think about that. But Andrew Yang, I felt like He seems like a nice guy, but not ready to be president of the United States, nor was he ready to be mayor of the city of New York when he ran. So, we have to distinguish. This is the same problem I had with Trump, though. We have to, and I know it's not the same people. We have to distinguish between somebody having, certain intellectual capabilities or even pleasant personality from their actually ability to be elected and to serve in the capacity of the job.
I think that's fair. I think that's what I'm talking about. I think that having the ability to be an intellectual person for me is something that I want in a president, but also somebody whose policy agenda items I'm aligned with, who I feel like has a way of articulating those things, which I feel like Mayor Pete did and does, and to help people to understand them and can galvanize folks. Because the people you've named, like we have Biden, who has all this experience, but I don't think he's really good at articulating the things that we want. He's not progressive. I think that Obama was an incredibly intellectual person, a great thinker, but not progressive and too concerned with the feelings of white people who didn't support him in order to really get things done. And I just don't, it's my gut. I just don't feel like Mayor Pete is those things. I think that living in a marginalized space, having the privilege of whiteness still, but living in a marginalized space.
There are a lot of white gay men who had lived in a marginalized space who still have exercised all the privilege of whiteness when it serves their needs and it's convenient.
I agree with you. But I think having that sensitivity, in being informed, I'd rather be informed than not be informed. I'll say it that way, right? To some degree. And I think that
well, I would have voted for any Democrat over Donald Trump, no doubt about it. But I just didn't think that he was the best candidate. That's all.
You thought who was the best candidate then?
I didn't think Pete Buttigieg was the best candidate.
No, you thought who was?
Well, I don't know that I had a clear understanding. I think I liked Kamala Harris and Julian Castro. So those are the two. I never really publicly supported or endorsed anybody, but those are the two candidates I liked the most.
I get that. Well, we are aligned on Castro.
Yeah.
Do you think he has a political future?
I suppose I don't see the reason why he couldn't, but I don't know. It depends on when you say future. I guess you mean will he run for president?
Or governor or senator or who knows?
Okay. I don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for obviously this conversation and the time that we've shared today, and I hope the listeners and viewers, there will be viewers who will see with your protein shake, but advocating for
there was not alcohol. I'm trying to have a protein shake. Which reason?
Advocating for health and physical fitness,
and water.
That's right, and cashews.
Yes,
unless you have a nut allergy.
Almonds and cashews are all done. Almonds are better for you than cashews.
Well, thank you for this conversation and your insight and your experience, your perspective on it. I want to again encourage everybody to please support Keith's most recent book, The Politics of a Darkening America: Race Against Time. As I often say, please buy the book, and if you can, buy it from a Black-owned bookstore. Can you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can follow you on social media?
Well, primarily I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is at Keith Boykin. Instagram is at Keith Boykin, which is KeithBoykin. No S, because a lot of people like to put S on my name. I don't know why, but it happens all the time. And I'm also on Facebook and some other things, but I don't really use those as much, so I don't really know what my handle was. You can find it all on my website, keithboykin.com. So, and Twitter is mostly political. I think I've told you before. My Instagram is, more like thirst traps with occasional political commentary.
Thank you for your honesty. So if you're looking for thirst traps and politics, Instagram. If you're looking for just politics, Twitter it is. Thank you. This has been another amazing episode of Perspective. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please let us know and stay tuned for our next episode. Peace.